This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Liner Notes. Want to learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry pros I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician? Sign up for Liner Notes, my curated email newsletter where I share the best insights and knowledge gems from these conversations, some of which have been featured here on the podcast. From marketing to songwriting to touring and sync licensing, you'll get actionable tips delivered straight to your inbox every 2 weeks. Liner Notes Insider, the deep dive edition, will feature exclusive deep dives, detailed case studies, and premium content that goes beyond the podcast interviews. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com/liner notes. It's free to get started, and you can unsubscribe at any time. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabonzo. This is episode 329. How are you? Where are you? What are you wearing? Is the sun shining where you are? The sun is shining in Querétaro, where I live, after what feels like weeks of rain, so that's nice. In sad music news, Mick Ralphs of Bad Company fame dies at 81. May he rest in peace, and may his family weather this well. I don't know why, I guess it's an age thing, but these dying icons, young and old, gets to me. Amazon has apparently lost its ability to let longtime users change their password without getting locked out of their account. That happened in my household this week. And AI misinformation is a thing. Where is the promise of blockchain verifying truth? Huh? Where? You didn't know you were going to get some technology rant today, did you? Today I'm speaking with George Ajjan, also known as the Ajjancy. George has a fascinating dual career. He's a contemporary musician, original artist, and international political consultant. Though our conversation focuses entirely on his music career, I thought that was worth mentioning. What makes George's story particularly valuable for independent artists is his systematic approach to navigating some of the most challenging aspects of being an indie musician. He's developed a practical framework for legally distributing mashup covers, managing efficient studio sessions, and maintaining long-term creative scheduling while balancing real-life responsibilities, that other part of his career. Whether you are struggling with the legal complexities of derivative works, trying to maximize your studio budget, or looking for sustainable ways to stay consistent with your music career, George's insights offer actionable solutions that you can implement right away. So please enjoy this conversation with me and George Ajjan, aka The Ajjancy. Are you originally from New Jersey?
Yes.
Cool. What was it like growing up there?
Basically, where I grew up is The Sopranos. Like the set of The Sopranos is where I grew up. Right?
Really?
So that's my childhood. So yeah, I mean, it was middle class New York suburbs basically. People like me had learning, taking piano lessons was an aspirational middle class thing to do. So I mean, I had good music education, and that that kind of stuck with me and bring me into what I'm doing now as a passion project.
You're multi-instrumentalist, aren't you?
If you count badly playing numerous instruments, then yes, I can call myself a multi-instrumentalist. But I mean, listen, I can write music on a couple different instruments, but I wouldn't play them on any of the tracks that I'm releasing to people.
Okay. What's your primary instrument?
Probably, I would say my primary instrument is the piano, just because I learned that first, and I feel like technically a bit more competent on it. But I mean, these days, just because I travel a lot, a guitar is more readily available to me.
Sure.
And it's easy to tune up, whereas a piano that's anywhere might be really, really out of tune and not very useful. So, but I write on both instruments probably equally.
That's cool. I could see that.
And it's fun. It's fun to pass, when you come up with an idea for a riff or a song or a chorus or a progression or whatever, to pass it back and forth between the instrument and see how it evolves differently when you bring it to the guitar or you take it to the piano or whatever. You might change the bass notes a little bit, or each instrument has its own thing depending on what key you're in. If you're in certain keys on the guitar, you can do more interesting things because of open strings, and then you bring those voicings back to the piano and you end up going in a different direction. So I enjoy that, actually.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. So we dove right into your non-music professional life. How do you balance all that with doing the music thing?
Well, look, I mean, I think that's the main thing I would like to share with people is that if you're coming at this later in life and you wanted to do something creative, whether it's music or writing a book or being a playwright or being an artist or whatever it happens to be, you're only one person and you have 24 hours in a day and you got to sleep for a few hours and you probably have other family or personal responsibilities. So, your time is limited and you also need to learn things and there's certain things you need to do. I mean, we joke that these days a singer songwriter has to also be a photographer, video editor, social media guru, marketing expert, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and so you've got to figure out what are the things that I need most help on and what am I going to learn about doing. So like for me, for example, that was okay, am I going to spend my time learning to play better on the guitar, or am I going to spend my time learning how to mix songs myself, or am I going to spend my time learning how to make TikToks, or am I going to spend my time learning how to do outreach and promotion? I mean, there's a whole bunch of things, and there's so much information out there to learn, and a lot of it is free as well. I mean, really, you shouldn't be paying for it to learn anything until you really get to a level where you feel like I've learned so much of this, but I really think I need some expert advice to help me fine tune what I've learned. Um, so that's the trick. So for me, it was kind of deciding with the limited time that I have, what am I going to focus on? So I figured, okay, I work for a living. If I manage to put some money on the side, I can pay musicians and I can go into a studio and do those things properly. So I'm not gonna bother learning how to do mixing, and I'm not gonna spend hours and hours and hours rehearsing, which I should have been doing for the past 20 years, to be able to play the parts to my satisfaction. So I will accept I'm gonna pay professionals to do those different tasks. But when it came to other things, the songwriting, making the charts, being prepared for the session. I mean, I think that's such a huge thing. That's one thing that I feel like I learned well, and I'm eager to share with other people in my shoes because it's so important. Because when you decide you're going to go into a studio and work with professionals, and they have very high expectations, their time is very valuable, and they're charging you for their valuable time.
Right.
And so you've got to figure out what am I going to do and how am I going to prepare for these few hours I have in a studio or this day I have in a studio with these people to make the most out of my time and theirs.
Right.
Because a lot of people will go in unprepared, thinking that, oh, it's going to be just the boys in the band, and it's just going to be this magical experience, and it's not a magical experience. They've done this day in day out for decades, and I'm sure they like your material. They may even love your material, but in the end, it's what direction do you give them to enable them to do the best job creating parts for what you've done, which means you got to make really good charts. They don't have to be perfect. The chart will never be perfect because there will always be the guys will say, well, listen, I think we need to vamp that first four bars another time, and they'll write it on the chart. Or listen, I think the bass note should change here, or let's do that measure in 2/4. Let's cut two beats out of there. That's fine. They're professionals. They can make amendments on the fly. But what you don't want to happen is to go in there with a demo that's not complete and a chart that's not complete and doesn't match the demo, because you'll be in a situation where you're on the clock and then you start sweating because people don't have direction. You haven't given them direction. You haven't told them exactly what you want, and you haven't given them the tools to help them figure it out. And that ends up being not a time killer, but also a mood killer. Because the last thing you want to happen is to get in there and say, oh, actually, I didn't really rehearse this vocal, and we're doing this song in B flat major, but I think we should transpose it down to A flat major so I can hit these higher notes on the runs that I'm trying to do. Well, then the bass player and the keyboard player are going to say, but we just spent 2 hours tracking this, in B flat. I mean, I'm going to go do that again. All right, now I got to relearn the part that I just did, and the fingerings are going to be different. I mean, just those, I'm giving detailed examples, but those things can happen if you're not ready. And the other thing to remember is no matter how ready you think you are, you'll never be ready enough because there will always be things that are unanticipated, technical glitches. There will be issues of personality. There will be issues of, your personal performance, your preference, the sound not being right. And, you've got to be open-minded enough to work through those things on the fly. But really the best thing you can do is be well prepared. Have a demo that is clear about how the song is structured, verse, chorus, pre-chorus, whatever it is, okay? And have a chart that matches that demo. So that if you're going to make changes to either of those two things, everyone's reading from the same piece of paper and understands exactly what's at stake there.
Right. Do you, in the scenarios that you typically build out for your recording, do you have any rehearsal time, or is it just you bring the charts and these guys kind of know what they're doing and you might run through it a couple times?
That's a really good question because I come from like the world of classic rock. Like that's the music that I fell in love with. That's my idiom, right? So
Hmm.
you spend your childhood and your teen years learning every single morsel of information about your favorite bands and how they work together, and watching all the documentaries and reading all the books and all the interviews and all that stuff. I still do that. I stay up late at night, going watching these old VH1 interviews with my favorite bands and all of that. And that's wonderful. But it gives you a false sense of how things function today, because when you're in your late 40s and you hire some studio pros to go into the studio to work on your stuff, you are not a bunch of 20 somethings with long hair that are living in a van that are just the band, and you're going to work on it together, and you're going to say, all right, George, what do you have, let's work it out and let's make this into an amazing track. That's not really how it works. The way it works
Hmm.
is you go in there like, okay, George, show us the chart, we've listened to the demo, okay, and what's the sound you're looking for? Okay, let's go and do it. We'll run through it a few times, and they start tracking right away.
Yeah.
And then they say, okay, how was that first one? Oh, I think it should be a little bit slower, or I think this, or I need to work out a bass riff for that section. Give me 5 minutes to work that out. And then everybody takes a break for five. Okay, we're ready to go back. Let's track it again. And then look, everything's digital now, so you're going to cut and paste from different takes.
Hmm.
But that's how it goes.
Yeah.
It's not, we're going to rehearse for a week and then we're going to go into the studio. Like the rehearsing happens while you're making the tracks. At least
Right.
that's been my experience. Even if I wanted to be a different way, the people that I'm working with don't really function that way. I mean, they are
Hmm.
people my age who have jobs and families, and they want to come to the studio for the day, put in their time, and then go home, and cook dinner and do whatever, take their kids to football practice or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then I think you sort of open up with you typically deal with studio pros, so they sound like the guys that like know that's going to happen at the studio that day. But I was just
Yeah.
kind of curious, and I'm sure and you sound like you've been playing music for a long time, so I'm sure you had those days where you're doing a lot of rehearsing, and any recording you did do was like well rehearsed because that's just the way you guys worked when you were younger and as a band and all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, look, my first project was a project of mashup covers, which meant that I had to really meticulously make demos, because it's not just okay, like the same, A minor, C, F, G progression. Like I took songs that don't really belong together and that have iconic parts to them
Hmm.
and fit them together. So like for example, taking Billie Jean by Michael Jackson and Roundabout by Yes, which are essentially the same chord progression in the verse, and each of those songs has an iconic bass line. I mean, you could say probably the most iconic bass line of the 70s and the most iconic bass line of the 80s. And so what I did was laid down the first verse was the bass line of Billie Jean with the vocal melody of Roundabout, and then it flip flopped for the second verse, the bass line of Roundabout and the vocal. So the point is, like when you're doing that kind of demo, you need to have a really good demo to go in there with, because you're looking for an iconic part. They're not making up a part. They have to exactly nail something that's iconic. So that really took a lot of what I call mad scientist work, because I had to rip the stems, I had to tempo match them, I had to speed them up or speed them down, change the key as necessary to make sure that everything fit on a grid, so that I can make a
Hmm.
demo out of it,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that the
right.
guys, when we went to the studio, would know exactly what we were trying to recreate.
So the mashup work that you mentioned seems like it has some elements that people would be interested in. So,
Yeah.
talk about like the legal side of covers and mashups,
Yes.
and
So that's really another very, very good lesson. And again, that's another thing, like, okay, how much time do I want to spend learning about this, or do I just say forget about it? So, very basic primer on the way copyright law works. Oftentimes people will hear a song on the radio and say, I wonder how much they paid to do a cover of that song. Do they have to pay the artist? And the answer is technically yes, but in reality, no, because it's an automatic, what they call mechanical license. With any song that's released, you pay a small fee and you have the right to cover the song, which means that the performance, the master of the song belongs to you. So whatever revenues are derived from playing the song belong to you. And then the publishing royalties go to the person who originally wrote the song.
Mhm.
That's a piece of cake. Anybody can do that. Anybody in the world can do that. In the case of a mashup, it's a little bit different, because even though I'm not sampling, I mean, these things were already played. What I'm doing is I'm taking two songs together. So, like, to use another example from that debut album, when you take Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues from 1967 and Nothing Else Matters by Metallica from 1990 or 1991, which are essentially the same song, they have the same chord progression, same rhythm, same time signature, same tempo. Um, but I put those two songs together. So I can't just go to release it on Spotify and say, oh, well, I think half the song was written by, James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich, and the other half was written by Justin Hayward. You can't just do that. What I would have to do is I would have to go to a lawyer, or what they call a clearing agent, and they would have to reach out to the copyright holders on my behalf to say, hey, this guy called the agency has a mashup cover. He wants to combine your song with, James Hetfield. He wants to combine Nothing Else Matters with Nothing Nights in White Satin. And James Hetfield might say, absolutely not. That's a terrible idea. I don't want that to happen. In which case, you're dead. You can't do anything about it. Or he might say, yeah, sure, okay, I don't care. How much are they going to pay me? Well, he'll pay you X $1,000 up front, and then a certain percentage they will have to agree. Hayward's people would have to agree with Hetfield's people on the split of that. I mean, Roberto, that's a big legal. I mean, a lawyer for these things charges like $350 an hour, whereas for those who aren't in the know, a good studio costs like $400 an hour, and a professional musician $400 a day. I'm sorry, a good studio pro will cost you $500 a day. So like an hour and a half of a lawyer's time is equivalent to a day of a studio pro working with you. So for me, like that's a no-brainer. I'm not going to spend the money on lawyers. So the positive side to that story is YouTube realizing that, look, people want to do covers of songs because that's another thing. Technically, if you do a video of a song, you playing a song, you need what's called a sync license, which would be another whole huge effort. And YouTube said, all right, look, these record companies, they are trying to milk their legacy artists for all they're worth. So nobody's going to go and spend the money. Some kid in his bedroom playing a cover of Nothing Else Matters is not going to go and hire a lawyer to get a sync license. So YouTube was smart enough to say, listen, we have technology, what they call the content ID system, that will identify the song being played and will attribute the copyright automatically. And then YouTube negotiated master agreements so that those revenues would be automatically allocated to the copyright holders, which is why for almost all artists, you're able to upload your covers to YouTube because ultimately it gets people interested in those songs. Like we've seen many, many examples of songs from decades ago back to the top, hit back at the top of the charts because people have done cool covers of them on YouTube. But in the case of the mashup covers, it's the same thing. YouTube will say, okay, well, we had detected these two songs, and it's up to YouTube to figure out how they're going to split the royalties for that stuff. So that was a legal way for me to do what I wanted to do. But in another sense, that project was kind of an internship for me because I had spent so many years writing songs and waited for the opportunity to have the chance to go into the studio and do them. And I thought, before I do my own stuff, let me make the rookie mistakes, like I mentioned before, all those things that might go wrong in the studio. Let me do that with someone else's songs, with my own arrangements, but someone else's songs. And so it was kind of using that as a testing ground, as using those songs as guinea pigs.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I forgot about the YouTube content ID thing. I was like, how does this end up working? But I had
I mean, and frankly, it doesn't work all the time because if I look at some of those 7 tracks, some of them were not even detected by YouTube.
I was wondering that as well, and I was also
so
wondering, do they sometimes just, for some reason that may be difficult to determine, reject them or something, or pull them
Well,
out?
I mean, there's famous examples of this that will just be blocked with a big red rubber stamp that says no, like Jimi Hendrix's estate. You don't see Jimi Hendrix covers on YouTube because they block. Don Henley, another famous blocker, which boggles the mind because, dude, you're going to make a hell of a lot of money if people learn about Hotel California from some kid playing a really good cover of it. No, the answer is no. They don't allow it. And then others, things are changing. I mean, I did a cover of a mashup cover that took King Crimson, frame by frame, a song from 1981, and mashed it up with a Taylor Swift song called Style. And long story short, Robert Fripp, the guitarist of King Crimson, the founder of the band, ended up hearing the track and thought it was cool. He actually jammed along to it, and he made a little video jamming along to it.
That's cool.
So that was really, really, I thought that was great. It's like, wow, these guys are paying attention to what the covers that people do of their stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very nice. So it is a minefield. Something can be, but it's nice that you
look,
gave
I
a
wish
clear
I had an easy
walkthrough.
answer to people saying, hey, just say 50% belongs to this artist and 50% belongs to this artist. No, the reality is you've got to spend a fortune on lawyers, and that's negative energy to me, to like even have to worry about, are they going to say yes or going to say no? Like, I don't want to spend my time. I want to spend my time writing songs and making music, not arguing with lawyers, for which is ultimately, I mean, this industry is archaic. They're still trying to figure out how to milk every last drop out of their legacy catalog. So I'm hoping that what YouTube has done will become more of a norm, and that eventually even Spotify and the likes and Apple Music will have a way to automatically allocate the royalties so that mashup covers can get out there, because they're a lot of fun to do and to listen to.
Yeah, that could happen, I suppose. And so, have you made any legal mistakes learning, trying this stuff?
Well, I haven't gotten any summons yet. But I guess it's one of those things where it's like, if you get big enough and somebody wants to sue you over it, that's a good problem to have. I mean, somebody has a few hundred streams on a song, nobody's coming after you for that. But on the other hand, if things are just automated, like we mentioned with Content ID, and some 22-year-old intern working for Universal Music says, "Oh, this guy violated the copyright of whatever," take action against him, block him, or whatever. I mean, you don't want to end up with anything like that. I haven't had any strikes on. I mean, this famous rule, three-strike rule on YouTube. I haven't had any strikes. So there's a couple of things that were blocked, like they wouldn't be shown, but it didn't count as a strike against me or my channel. So that was a good thing.
That's good. That sort of sounds like, this makes YouTube kind of the safe harbor, the safest approach
Yeah,
anyway for
YouTube is
doing the kind of
definitely
thing.
the safest place for these things. I think there's a lot of people who upload things like this to Spotify and just don't attribute it properly. And what I didn't want to do is risk, because I'm not just a covers artist. And I'm releasing my own material now. I didn't want to put my artist name, my account in jeopardy for the sake of releasing the mashup covers on Spotify when they're already out on YouTube. I figured that's, as you said, a safe harbor. Let me use Spotify and the others in the totally legal, correct way.
Yeah, that's pretty much the only way you can. The way they got it set up. I mean, with the I want to call them distributors, but these services like TuneCore and some of the other
Yes,
more
yes,
popular
yes.
ones, and that is largely to save the Spotifys of the world from dealing with people who submit things incorrectly,
Right.
and plus
Yeah.
it's great for the artist in a way because everything gets done through one place, so that's kind of nice.
Yes. Yeah. No, it does facilitate things.
hmm What about finding session musicians? Do you have any tips or experience you think that musicians might appreciate, like for finding the right players and the
Well,
processes
I
for?
got very, very lucky in this sense because the first one was I had started. This is back in the days of the pandemic when everybody was sitting at home, including the best musicians in the world. And I realized, like, even on Fiverr, you can find amazing people. And so I ended up hooking up with a guitarist named Fernando Perdomo, who became my go-to guy for the guitar. And I just loved his style and his whole approach to production and songwriting and crafting material and parts and solos was very much in line with my own. We have a lot of the same taste in music. And so I got really lucky finding him there. But then the other thing that happened was a friend from high school who was a professional bass player, still is, obviously, and also a studio engineer and a wonderful guy who knows a ton of stuff about recording. And when I sent him some of the tracks I was working on with guys I'd hired on Fiverr, and he said, "Look, frankly, for the amount of money you're paying, this is really, really good. But if you want to take it to another level, I can recruit session guys that I know, and you can bring them to a studio for 2 days, and you can record a whole bunch of tracks all at once, and get a whole vibe going. And it will cost you a little bit more, but it will be worth it in terms of the quality that you get and the overall continuity of the sound." So we ended up doing that, and then I put those two pieces together. So in the latest round, Fernando, who's based in LA, went up to the Bay Area. We work out of a studio in Berkeley called Opus, which is a wonderful, magnificent studio for $400 a day. And you have this room that's with a big arched ceiling, which gives you a great effect for recording rock drums instead of
hmm
being in a small room. So you get the right kind of ambient echo and the room sound. So that's been really, really wonderful working out of there.
Sounds
And
nice.
some of the other studio people I hired for little bits here and there, some of them don't work out. Sometimes you hire somebody for a part, you pay them $75 or $100 to do a remote, track some guitar parts or whatever, and it's not really the vibe you're looking for. And okay, that, but you kind of betting on stuff like that. Like,
hmm
let me give it a try. And sometimes you hire somebody for $50, and they end up being somebody that you go back to again and again and again because they just they deliver quickly and really good sound quality, and it just works for you. So you have to experiment with some of that. It will, again, don't expect that everything's going to go right, because it's not. There's going to be people you hire that don't work out. There's going to be money you spend that ends up being wasted, and that's part of the learning of it. And it's better that way, frankly, because if everything goes well the first time, if you want to go and do a track or do a set of tracks and everything goes perfectly, you can be lulled into the false sense of security that it's easy. And then what happens is when you want to go and invest more money and go into a better studio to do the next time, then you're going to find out what doesn't go right, and then you have more at stake.
Right.
So, I mean, again, being in your late 40s and not in your early 20s, that's benefit of life experience tells you that things are not going to go the way you plan them. Don't be too naive about it. Go in there with the best expectations, prepare yourself, but you have to know that not everything goes perfectly.
Yeah, don't be too naive, don't be too precious, right?
Exactly.
Do you do a hybrid of remote and in face-to-face recording on your
Oh,
projects?
definitely,
Okay.
definitely. Because there's some things, I mean, when I I wanted to get the band together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so definitely drums and bass recorded together. I mean, for rock, in a rock idiom, that's definitely something you want to have if at all possible. In the last set, we had everybody together: keyboards, drums, bass, and guitar, and we were all tracking simultaneously. Like that was a wonderful experience. But prior to that, it was bass and drums together, and then guitar overdub later on. But even if I went down to the studio and we were working face to face, we were still overdubbing on the previous tracks done in another studio, and
Mm-hmm.
then keyboards would be done remotely as well. So it's kind of a hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
And even after you spend, you have your four guys in the room and you make the tracks, there's always going to be other little additions that are going to be done remotely. So, that's totally fine, and that's kind of standard practice these days, I think.
Yeah, it's curious for me. I've done a little bit of recording of the quality, where I could distribute, and everything was remote. This was, during the pandemic, but I had
Right.
people in, one guy in California, one guy in Texas. I was in Panama at the time, and then one of the other tracks there was a guy in England, and the rest of the guys that I talked about. So it's kind of, and I'm doing drums and vocals
Right.
just at home, and it worked out. But it's just been my only experience. When I was younger, though, I had like in studio experience with other musicians. But only one of those sessions, like a truly sort of high end studio experience. But yeah, it has evolved a lot, hasn't it, over the
Yeah. And
decades?
look, this is one of the big things for me why I felt so emboldened to do all of this. And I wouldn't have been able to do it when I was younger because I didn't have the means to do it.
Mhm.
But when we grew up, people in our age group, it was like either you had a multi-million-dollar record deal or forget it. You would just be playing at the local bar forever, right?
Exactly.
Because I had the idea if I ever wanted to make an album, it would cost me $250,000. And nowadays, it costs you a small fraction of that. I mean,
Yeah.
let's say a very low five-figure sum. You could do all this. So if you squirrel away some money, you can make it happen in a very professional way, in a very satisfying way, and that's what I was fortunate enough to be able to do. But don't be discouraged because it's not a humongous millionaire effort to go and make really really good quality music.
Yeah, and so many young people right now are emboldened to just do it themselves, and some of them doing quite a remarkable job.
No, look, some
But
of it's
yeah,
great, and some of them learn. I mean, but on the other hand, there's some people that put out stuff that is not quite up to par.
yeah,
And that's a whole other discussion about, do you just put out everything you can or do you curate or whatever?
hmm
When you're, again, in our age group and you've got decades of backlog of songs and people, these gurus say, don't put out any mid material. And I'm like, dude, I haven't put out any songs for 25 years. So of all those songs I've written in 25 years, I'm sure I can pick the best ones to make a really good album. And none of it's going to be things I'm kind of filling it with.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So are there any good to knows about handling for people that haven't done it before, but like handling contracts and payments with session pros, some of the people that you hire, or is it all pretty seamless these days?
Well, yeah, it depends on, first of all, if you're doing it through something like Fiverr or Sound Better, I started with Fiverr. Sound Better is, let's say, a bit more upscale. You might find a bit more professionalism, but on Fiverr, you have, I think, a broader range of talent. And sometimes if you need something simple, like just a simple solo or a simple part, you can find it for cheaper. But all of those are platforms that take a cut based on connecting this and making it secure. So in those cases, you have absolutely nothing to lose
Right.
because you pay the money, and if something goes wrong or it's not delivered properly, it's peer reviewed, and you also have the possibility of having them intervene to adjudicate if anything is unclear, or
Mm.
you feel that you didn't get what you paid for. In other situations, again, if somebody that is bringing guys to a studio, they're kind of vouching for you. So there's kind of a personal code of honor there that when you finish the session, you're going to pay them. I mean, my personal thing is as soon as the session's done, I say, okay, guys, what's your number for Zelle, or what's your PayPal? And they're paid before they even walk out the door of the studio, just because I want to feel better about that, but also I want them to know if I work with George, I'm getting paid on time, and that means next time I call them up, they're going to say, "Oh, if I go work for him, it's a payday immediately."
Yeah.
And the funny part was that I'm working on a Four Seasons mashup hybrid project, and so we brought in some string players, and I was saying to Dan, the bassist engineer who convened everybody, said, "Oh, I want to make sure I paid them on time." He goes, "Oh, these are string players. These are like session union musicians. They're used to getting paid months later than the sessions that they do. So they'll be very happy if you pay them right on the day. They'll be shocked that such a thing is even possible."
I believe it. That's funny. That is
But
funny.
these are things that you like. I didn't know any of that stuff. These are things that you learn, these cues that you pick up about how the industry works. I mean, um, that if you haven't been in and out of studios in all these years, things that are industry norms are not obvious to a bystander.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Big learning experiences, I'm sure.
But I think musicians are generally pretty cool. A lot of people.
Hmm.
They
Mostly.
tend to be they tend to be cool. They tend to be forgiving. They tend to be reasonable. Um, some of them can be prima donnas. That's true. But if you avoid that bit of it, in terms of dealing with them on a personal level, I found it to be a very, very positive experience.
And so, how do you stay consistent with your creation of music and the other things around it while you're doing all these things you do in your
Well,
day life?
that's the answer is I don't always. So, like for example, right now I'm doing the process of trying to put out short form content every single day and promoting each song for 6 weeks, doing what they call the waterfall strategy, which is you don't roll out the album all at once. You roll it out track by track, six weeks for this track, 6 weeks for the next single, etc. And then at the end you wrap it all together. And you should be finding a way to promote that song using short form content every single day over the course of that 6 weeks. So again, 24 hours in a day, one physical body. That's what's taking up my time right now, which means I'm not writing material. I'm not recording. In fact, I should be rehearsing vocals for takes that I need to do in the next couple months. I should probably be following up on that, but life gets in the way. So right now, I've just decided to focus on that part of it. Partly because, Roberto, I spent a lot of time in the studio over the past 3 years, and I got a lot of stuff that's ready. And it's
Oh,
like, okay,
cool.
you need to get the stuff out there before you go and spend time and money making more of it. Don't
Hmm.
end up in that situation where then like, oh, I have all this stuff, and then I lose the energy to put it out. Like while I have the energy to put it out, I'm going to put it out. And so I'm focusing on that right now.
That's cool. That's a good plan. It's nice that you amassed some recordings, however many
Yeah,
it
well,
was.
it started in 2022. The first time I went in the studio was 2022, and that was mostly for the Mashups project, but a few other little things. And then I went into the studio again, I think twice in 2023. Like, and I'm going to say like 2 days at a time, doing more backing tracks, and then again in 2024. So yeah, I've got enough for this first album that's coming out this year, and then as I said, this Four Seasons mashup cover project that will be rolled out in 2026. And then there's another album that's mostly recorded already for the year after that. So like I've got a lot of stuff to keep me busy for the next 2.5 years.
You batched
Or year next,
your
the next
recording.
2.5 years probably.
You batched all your
Yeah,
studio work for the next couple of years.
exactly.
That's great. That's great. So
Yeah.
did you say you have basically your marketing calendar and whatever else you can squeeze in for the music for the rest of the year because of this one project and then
Well, I have it broadly sketched out. So here's what I mean. Again, I'm regurgitating what I've learned on YouTube and from these gurus. Okay, let's say you're going to do a song for 6 weeks. Okay, so each week you should have a big event, which is like a landscape video on YouTube, a proper video and full length video
Mhm.
of the song. So you have to find in the course of 6 weeks 6 different ways to distribute that. So a lyric video, a visualizer video. I tend to do a score video because I'll have like the score of the song with the chord chart and the melody.
Yeah, that's
I'll
cool.
turn that into a video. I've done some. I have a great American Sign Language translator who does ASL versions of some of the songs. I think that's a really nice technique to use.
Mm-hmm.
And then whatever other kind of official video you're going to do, whether you lip syncing or whatever. So each week you should have one of those, and then the rest of the 6 days of the week, some kind of short form content to promote the song, whatever that happens to be. And that's kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's a lot of work because you have to look at what other people in your genre are doing. You have to observe other trends, see what memes are out there. And again, for people our age, make a fool of yourself trying to copy these Gen Z kids. So part of my thing is like I'm going to make fun of the fact that I'm trying to copy what these young kids are doing, because in the end you have to be authentic and you have to be yourself. So yeah, I'm going to be sarcastic and making fun of how ridiculous it is to try to put out a short form video every single day.
It's tough, man.
And some of them work, and then you have to collab with other people. So like doing podcasts like this, I clip them, and where a part where I'm talking about the song, I will clip that and turn that into a 60-second clip with the song playing in the background, just to have different. And then for example, so I'll tag you in that so that your people see that, and then that also promotes your podcast, that kind of thing. I mean, look, it's an overused word maybe, but community is really the name of the game for this stuff, because
Totally.
as somebody, like I said, who's influenced so deeply by classic rock, but the fans of classic rock music are not looking for me. They're not looking for a guy who's putting out music in 2025 because he loves music from 1972. They're interested in playing the best hits of 1972. So what you need to do is find other people who are also putting out music in 2025, who are also influenced by music from 1972. And those are the people you need to find, their fans, and link together, so you get all that algorithmic love, as they call it.
It's exhausting.
It really is exhausting. It's exhausting to even talk about it again.
No, it's really good. I mean, in a way, it's a shame that this is the way we have to do it, and
Yeah, but you know
can't
what?
necessarily spend time
It's
doing
never
those
been a
things.
better time, because the
True.
fact that you and I are talking about this right now,
Hmm.
and that somebody can hear about it and say, "Wow, that's really great. I learned something," or "I like his songs," or "I like his podcast." I mean,
Absolutely.
that was never possible before. Because
I
before, it was, again, either you had a record company picking you out of the cast and giving you $1 million deal, or which basically meant turning you into their slave, but that's a whole other thing. Or to do an interview like this, it's like you had to be big enough that some radio host, some radio station want to interview you.
Hmm.
I mean, now all of us in our bedrooms are able to talk about it and share about it, which is great.
It is. It is
So,
very nice.
again, I don't complain, because, in fact, that's one of my memes, is like making fun of the people who sit around complaining about how the algorithm is so unfair. Well, too bad. It's better than the way it used to be.
I think I suffer a syndrome like therapist or something, because I listen to a lot of what artists are doing, and also listen to, well, I talk to, but then I listen to a lot of famous artists and
Yeah.
hear some of the weird stuff that they deal with, which is some of the same stuff that independents deal with, and I'm just
Yes.
like, oh my God, it's maddening. But I'm still playing music. I still have aspirations to record again. I love talking to people
Yes.
like you. So,
Yes. Yes.
yep.
We're
Wow.
lucky.
Have you? It sounds like you have, but what's your sort of process for thinking through changing direction in musically?
So, I was, again, having had so many years to think about how I wanted to do all of this. I kind of had, the idea that the first project would be a covers project. But even then, that changed. And this is actually a really good question, because it's important that you cannot be completely wedded to what you had in mind when the first day that you decided you're going to do this, the first day you went to the studio, because circumstances change and other magic happens, and it may change your plans. So when I first went in to say I'm going to do a covers project, it was like 3 or 4 mashup covers and then a couple other regular covers. And then over time, I said, no, you know what? Thematically, it would better to do just mashup covers. And then I added a few later that we went back in other sessions and recorded. And then those other covers ended up on a later project. So you have to be flexible in terms of how you plan these things out. Songs, I have a list, on my notes on my phone of, this is the track list for the album, and I have it all, I have it all marked down. This song is in G major, then the next song starts in A major, so that to make sure that the keys match up or don't match up as you may want them to. Which
Hmm.
songs have fade outs and which ones don't, so that you don't want 2 songs with a fade out back to back, stuff like that. But that's just me dreaming about it on my notes. When you actually go and put it all together, it may change. Other people's ideas may make you want to
Influence you,
change
right?
it. So
Yeah.
you have to have an open mind. You have to be true to your art, but you have to be flexible to some point. And it's kind of like what you said before. Don't make the perfect the enemy of the good, because it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
never perfect. Even if you go back and, I mean, Brian Wilson, okay, will go back and say, "Oh, I wasn't really happy with the harmonies on Pet Sounds." When we're like, "That's like the greatest thing that was ever done," and you weren't happy with the harmonies on Pet Sounds. So the point being, even the people that we worship practically are not happy with everything that they did. So we have to go a little bit easy on ourselves too.
And those old guys made the most beautiful, imperfect sounds ever. That's just not possible
And
anymore.
it's really, I mean, I get more and more inspiration from them, because I'm doing covers. Like right now, the one I'm in the middle of promoting is a cover of Blackbird by the Beatles,
I heard
and
it.
it's kind of a minor key reharmonization. And there's some people who don't like it at all. And I'm like, I am in love with the fact that you think that I'm being sacrilegious, because if the Beatles or any of those other bands didn't start by doing covers, they never would have gotten to the point that their music captured us the way that it did, because
Hmm.
that's how they got started, was taking and being creative with what other people had already done. And so in a way, yes, it's blasphemy, but we owe it to them to be blasphemous. And that's my approach to covers.
Yeah, I heard that. It's nice, and I appreciate it too because I've covered, not recorded, but covered Blackbird, and so you did a
Oh,
nice
thank you.
job. And
Appreciate that.
I actually have heard several of the others that you've mentioned too, the mashups. They're kind of cool. I like them.
They were fun. It was a lot of fun doing that.
You know, we talked about all these things that artists have to do. So for the ones that do feel overwhelmed, maybe there's kind of two ways to ask this question. You know, I was going to ask for like your best advice for setting themselves up with a creatable routine, or maybe just, you know, what are some of your favorite productivity practices that you have, because you undoubtedly have to be very productivity minded, whether it's at the
Yeah.
forefront of your mind or the back of your mind.
Yeah, you do. You do. I find at this stage it's easy because it's very measurable. I need to put out a short form piece of content every single day. So that might be batching it, like spending a few hours one day so that I have content ready for the next 4 or 5 days, or just saying, okay, I'm going to spend an hour on CapCut, putting this together, subtitling it, putting the captions, doing all that stuff, putting whatever effects I want to have in there. That's kind of easier to do when you're in. Oh God, I need to start plotting out my next album. How much time am I going to spend writing today? How much time am I going to spend? Whatever. Artistically, I find that you just have to go with the flow. And if you spend hours more sitting at the piano than you expected to, or you spend hours more on your digital audio workstation figuring out the tracks and the form of the song, you just got to go with the flow of that. I don't think, at least for me, I don't find that that should be regimented or managed. That's just kind of, even in my professional life, I'm not the type that's exactly on the clock. Okay, I'm from 9 to 10, I'm going to do this. I just kind of go with whatever is flowing at a particular moment.
Do you have to travel for I'm going to call it journalistic work. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but do you have to travel for that side of your work
Yeah,
life?
yeah, I do. In fact, this last year I've been on the road quite a bit,
Assumed you did.
which is in a way good because it gives me time, because when I'm traveling, I don't have physically the need to take care of my kids and make sure they have lunch for school and drive them to their practices or their activities or their play dates or whatever it happens to be, which
Yeah.
means I'm on my own in a hotel room somewhere, and it's just me and my computer, or me and I have a guitar with me, and that gives me time to work on that stuff. So that's a blessing in disguise from time to time having to be away from my kids. It gives me the chance to be closer to my musical pursuits.
Yeah, yeah. How old are your kids?
14 and almost 11.
Trouble and trouble.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you should see. The trouble is when I try to get them to play music with me. That's that's when the trouble really starts.
That's great.
Yeah.
Eh, Given that you've been doing music for a while too, what has caught your eye most in the terms of how the landscape for being an independent artist has changed since you started, or since the independent artist was a thing?
I think what's overwhelmed me the most, and I still haven't wrapped my head around it, is like how much research it is to figure out what music is out there today.
Yeah.
Because just going to the hits playlist, if
Mm.
you're an indie artist like me, it's not going to inform you in any particular way. You got to really research to find artists who sound like you, and that takes time to listen to those. It takes 3 minutes to listen to a song, or maybe more. And that's a lot of time spent listening. So that's a lot of time, when I'm in the gym, for example, if I'm spending an hour in the gym, okay, let me put on the playlist. Like I'll find a playlist like best new indie rock or something like that on Spotify. And I'll put it on there. And every song that comes up, if it even is vaguely in my ballpark, immediately favorite the artist, and then click on their bio and find out, if they have an Instagram page, immediately follow them on Instagram. So that starts working into my feed and starting to familiarize myself with other artists that are somehow in my genre, because genre nowadays has become such a micro, nano, whatever. And I, to be honest, I just still haven't figured out what my genre exactly is. And that's been a challenge. It's not like the old days. It was like, oh, classic rock, okay, progressive rock, okay, blues rock, okay. It's these days it's much, much, much more refined.
Yeah. I think that other people are the best judges of what genre you may be viewed under, because
Totally.
like
And
when
that
I
would be
re
good if I'm talking to somebody like you who's informed. But if I play it for friends or family, you know what they say? Oh it reminds me of the Beatles. Well, thanks. I mean,
That's useful. I
oh, it
find
reminds
I
me of reminds me of 70s rock. Yeah, yeah, I know, but that doesn't help me end per se.
sometimes that's useful though because like for me, I had in mind, well, like when I started a project, I kind of envisioned it sounding one way, and it comes out another way, somewhat to a large degree, and then you hear the feedback from people, and they start comparing you. They may compare you to other artists, and it's kind of got me thinking when that
And
happened.
yes, and every artist will tell you that they hear the most shocking things that people hear, and that's another important point because you know all the things that influenced you, but somebody who hears your song doesn't know those things, and there may be things that subconsciously crept their way in that you don't recognize. And an example of that is the next song I'll be promoting is a cover of More Than Words by Extreme, where I brought the song to the piano and did it in a much darker kind of a context.
Mm.
And the engineer, I did that in a small studio just to do the vocal recordings after we had, well, that was done remotely. This is just piano and vocal. And the Disney musical. And at first I was like pretty offended, actually. Like, I'm a rock artist. We need Disney musical. What kind of cheesy crap is that? And I realized, like, no, but you know what? When I was in high school, I was on stage, I was doing musical theater, and so probably the drama of musical theater arrangements is somewhere in my musical DNA in a way that I don't recognize explicitly,
Hmm.
but it's in there. And so I've learned, and like a lot of other people have learned, embrace, as you're saying, embrace what people tell you your music reminds them of because they know ultimately better than you do.
Yeah, yeah. I too was surprised, but I was like, yeah, well, nobody said anything that wasn't an influence on me, that's for sure. But
Mm-hmm.
it just wasn't the influence I thought, was going for or thought of at the time. So, are there any trends that you think? I mean, maybe you've already mentioned them, but any trends you think that independent artists should pay attention to?
Well, of course, I mean, we can't have a discussion about trends without talking about artificial intelligence.
Mm.
So I think my personal view on the broad level of artificial intelligence in any field, whether it's in my regular job, professional life, or musical pursuits or anything, ultimately artificial intelligence is limited by human biology because even if a computer can create a billion songs with the click of a button, it still takes a human being 3 minutes to listen to a song to determine if he or she likes the song or not. So AI can create all of this stuff, but who's ever going to go and listen to it to determine if it's worth repeating? So I really don't worry about that. In terms of the tools, it's incumbent upon you to learn how to use the tools to make yourself more efficient. Just like when we were in school, learning how to use the calculator made you more efficient. It didn't replace having to know the fundamentals of math. It just made it easier, and it made the transition to be able to do more difficult mathematics require less time. And the same thing, that AI will enable us to do more sophisticated recording in less time. And that's a good thing. Just like when synthesizers came out, they replaced having to do a whole string section. Just like when quantization came out, et cetera, et cetera. There's a million examples of this. This whole AI is just the latest example of it. I refuse to use anything that's not human produced. Like I will never use a fake AI vocal. I do use pitch correction. I do use certainly when I'm making the videos, the automatic tools enable you to caption the videos and all that stuff. It's a huge time savings.
Hmm.
So anybody who's getting into this should learn about these basic tools and learn to master them, not fearing that they're going to take away your importance as a songwriter or as a singer or whatever, but as a tool that will help you to be more efficient and more productive as a singer or a songwriter or a musician or whatever it is.
You mentioned CapCut again. Are you a Mac or Windows user?
I'm a Mac user.
Okay. I
So I'm really annoyed, by the way, that CapCut in the latest update, a lot of things that were free are now paid features.
Are you
So
using
I
the
might have
paid
to
or
actually
free version?
I was using the free version, but now things that were automatic are now suddenly paid, like the auto captions,
Yeah,
which I was using constantly, like for things like this, to
sure.
get the auto captions there. So I'm like, I might have to bite the bullet and pay $10 or $12 a month or whatever it is for to use CapCut. But again, these are wonderful tools. And you mentioned using. I mean, I'm a Mac user. I find it shocking how poor iMovie is in comparison to CapCut. I mean, it's almost incomparable. It's so inferior, and I'm shocked, really
Yeah,
shocked.
I've thought about a lot about that too, and I've used CapCut, and I very recently or somewhat recently tried it. I liked it, really loved it, as a matter of fact. And then they did what you mentioned, a feature
Yeah.
that I was using became a paid thing. And
Right.
it was unfortunate because it happened in the middle of a project. And I'm like,
Oh
well, that
God.
would have been nice if I would have
Yeah.
known that was going to happen to me. So I haven't used it since. But, Apple has, also they have GarageBand and they have Logic.
Yes.
They have iMovie, and then they have, what is it, Final Cut?
Final Cut Pro. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, so, and
Yeah. Okay. So if I want to spend $300, that's fine. But CapCut is free. Well,
yes.
I mean, even the free version is still light years beyond what iMovie can do.
Yeah, I may look at it again. I got so mad that day. I'm like, screw this, all this. It's
Yeah, I
funny
hear you.
that,
That kind of bait and switch stuff is very annoying.
yeah, it's funny
But
that the more I've just sat and thought about what I'm trying to do, I know that iMovie's very basic in its functionality. I guess it's mostly they didn't put a lot of, well, they just didn't put a lot of features in it. But I'm I've been doing this with all kinds of
yeah,
applications, and by applications I mean, all the different things we're using on our computers and phones, and I'm realizing, oh, I have the ability to do that. I don't need a special app for that or that.
yes,
So I
yes,
know how to
yes,
do that, yeah. But you just
yeah,
have to sort of think because we get so used to using these
yeah,
things. Have
yeah.
you toured, or do you tour? Do you have plans to tour?
Oh God, no. I mean, that's something, again, if you talk about like hours spent in a day, like rehearsing to be able to play a live gig somewhere is something that's way, way, way down my priority list just because
Hmm.
um it's not something that would come as naturally to me, and it would be a big stress. And yes, eventually I would like to do it. Maybe I'll start doing coffee houses around somewhere, but that's not immediately in the plans. No.
Yeah, you should. You'll enjoy it, I think. Yeah, you will enjoy it.
Yeah, I know, but
A lot to do. A lot more
it's a
to
lot.
think
It's
about.
it's a lot of I don't know. I haven't been on the stage playing like that in a long, long, long time,
But you have
and
done it. Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
you have
I
done
have
it.
done it in the past. But and maybe I would fall in love with it. But it's just like the amount of rehearsal time I would have to put in to be able to play some of because I'd have to play and sing at the same time. It wouldn't be easy for me
Yeah.
technically. Just like I'm limited technically.
Hmm. I get it. I get
Yeah,
it. Well, hey, I think we covered a lot of good stuff here.
we
And
sure did. Yeah, it was
yeah,
great.
and I know your website is theagency.com, and that's
Yes,
AJJANCY, but I'll put it in the show notes because that's going to be tough
please
for
do.
people to remember.
Yes, yes,
And yeah, George, also known as the agency. It was a real pleasure talking with you. I appreciate it a lot.
absolutely, bro. Thank you so much.
As an independent podcaster, your support means the world to me. You could even say I depend on it. With that in mind, here are some things you can do to help support us. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Or shoot me a review by email, robonzo@unstarvingmusician.com, that I can use on the website. Or just share this episode with a friend. This makes a huge impact on our audience growth. You could also visit our crowd sponsor page at unstarvingmusician.com/crowd sponsor to learn of the many other ways of supporting the podcast, including a quick and easy online tip jar. It's like click, tip, done, easy, and super appreciated. You'll find many ways of showing your support there, including through our affiliate partners like Bandzoogle, Kit, Email, formerly ConvertKit, DreamHost, and others. The music you're hearing is New Gods Part 2, the instrumental mix by yours truly. You can hear the full version, download it, or buy it at robonzo.com. And if all this was too much to remember or process, just go to the show notes for this episode at unstarvingmusician.com to find links to all the stuff talked about in this episode. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. Thanks for listening. Peace, gratitude, and a whole lot of love.